Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going high up to the mountains of Taiwan.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
Oh, it is. It is. We're exploring the future of the plant life way up there.
Okay.
And the presentation we're looking at today, get this, it uses this postcard concept to show us all about conservation efforts.
I like that.
Yeah.
Visual metaphors.
Yeah. It's a really clever way to make it easier to grasp.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the science and what's at stake.
Right, because sometimes that stuff can get pretty complicated.
Totally. So it's like we get to peek into two potential futures, you know?
Okay. I'm intrigued.
All right. So first you get a postcard. But it's not like, your typical touristy one.
Right.
This one's called the Challenge Postcard. And let me tell you, it's not a pretty sight.
Oh.
It's this barren mountain landscape, The plants are barely hanging on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the soil is all dry and exposed, and you can see where construction projects have just cut right through the slopes.
That sounds rough.
It is. It really makes you realize just how delicate these ecosystems are way up high.
They really are. And the presentation doesn't shy away from pointing fingers either.
Oh, at what?
Well, like development projects that mess up the habitats.
Yeah.
And pollution that seeps into the soil and just harms the plants.
It's like a chain reaction.
Exactly. And then, as those habitats shrink, it puts even more pressure on the wildlife.
It's heartbreaking. They show the impact on animals, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like picture a Formosan Cero, that goat antelope that's only found in Taiwan.
Right, yeah.
Trying to find something to eat or somewhere safe in this messed up landscape.
Oh, man.
Or even a squirrel just trying to find a safe spot.
Among all those withered trees.
Yeah, it really hits home.
Yeah, you can't forget that everything's connected in these ecosystems.
Exactly. When the plants start to disappear, it affects everything else.
It's a domino effect.
But hold on, we're not done with the postcards yet.
Okay.
It's time to flip over to the second one.
All right. What's this one called?
The Vision Postcard. And talk about a mood swing.
Oh.
This one shows a mountain scene that's just bursting with life.
Okay.
All kinds of different plants everywhere.
That's nice.
It's like the colors are even different, warmer tones,
Oh, I see.
Like a symbol of hope and like everything starting fresh.
I like that a lot. That's a really powerful way to get the point across.
It is. And it's not just about bringing those plants back either.
It's not.
No. This vision postcard shows a future where humans and nature actually get along.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not about keeping people out, but finding a way for us to all live together.
That's a pretty amazing vision.
It is. And the details they use, to really bring it to life.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Okay, so imagine the Formosan black bear. Not endangered anymore, just roaming free.
Through the forest.
Yes, lush, healthy forests. Or the Formosan macaque swinging through the trees.
Not a care in the world.
Right, and there's sunlight filtering through the canopy, like this warm glow over everything.
Like a movie.
It is. But, it does make you think. How do we get from that challenge postcard to this?
Right, it's a pretty big gap.
It is. Like, what are the things that got us to that bad place in the first place?
That's a good question. And can we actually fix them?
Yeah. And how realistic is it, really? This whole humans and nature living in harmony thing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea, but...
But how do we make it happen? I think we need to dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. I think the presentation uses these postcards, to jumpstart a much bigger conversation.
About what?
Sustainability.
Okay.
Responsibility, the consequences of what we do.
Yeah.
It really challenges us to think about how we treat the natural world.
That's deep.
It is. So let's unpack some of that, shall we?
All right, let's do it. What caused all that damage we saw in the challenge postcard?
Well, it's not just one thing,
Okay.
but the presentation points to human activity as a big factor.
You mean like how we're developing things?
Exactly. Especially when it's not sustainable. But there's also climate change, It makes everything worse.
Oh, right. Like with the temperatures rising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plant species have to move higher up the mountain to find the right conditions.
You survive.
Right. But then, well, you saw the challenge postcard.
Yeah.
Humans are often building in those same spaces.
So it's like a double whammy.
It is. It squeezes those species into smaller and smaller habitats.
Making that vision postcard even more important.
Exactly. We might need to actually restore things, not just protect what's left.
Okay, but how do you even begin to do that?
Well, that's where it gets really fascinating. The presentation goes into a bunch of different strategies. Policy changes, stricter rules,
Yeah.
community-based conservation, they call it.
Okay.
And they emphasize how important scientific research is
To understand it all.
and find solutions that actually work.
So it's not just about protecting what's there, but actively bringing back what's been lost.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not easy.
I bet. Those high mountain ecosystems are one of a kind, right?
Well, absolutely. And the presentation gets into some of the challenges that researchers and conservationists run into.
Like what?
Well, a lot of those plants, they've adapted to some pretty harsh conditions.
Up in the mountains?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to bring them back, you have to really understand what they need.
It's like a giant puzzle, right?
Exactly. A puzzle where you don't even have all the pieces
And then climate change is like moving the pieces around.
all the time.
Mm.
Yeah. So what worked before might not work now. Got to be adaptable.
So what are some of the solutions? Where do you even start with a problem this big?
One thing they focus on is reforestation.
Planting more trees?
It sounds simple,
Mm-hmm.
but they're being really specific. Native species that can handle climate change
Makes sense.
and planting them in a way that replicates how a forest naturally grows.
Okay, so helping the forest heal itself, basically.
That's the goal.
But what about the pollution? How do you even clean up soil that's been contaminated?
Yeah, that's a tough one. The presentation talks about something called phytoremediation.
Phytoremediation.
Yeah, it uses certain plants to actually suck the pollutants out of the soil.
Whoa.
It takes time.
But it works.
It can be really effective.
Wow, so using nature to fix itself.
Exactly.
That's pretty awesome. But it sounds like it takes a lot of people working together.
Absolutely. The presentation really emphasizes that.
Like who?
Researchers, government, local communities, even tourists,
People who just visit the mountains.
Yeah, everyone has a role to play.
But how do you get everybody on board? I bet there are some conflicting interests there.
You're right. They even mentioned that in the presentation.
About what?
Balancing economic development with conservation.
Oh, right. Because some people rely on those mountains for their jobs.
Exactly. Tourism, resource extraction, all that. So they have to find a way to make conservation, economically viable.
It can't just be about shutting everything down.
Right. It's about finding a balance so that both people and the environment benefit. And actually, they have some cool examples.
Of what?
Communities that are making it work, integrating conservation into their businesses.
Like how?
There's this growing trend of ecotourism in Taiwan's mountains.
So people can visit and learn about the ecosystem?
Exactly. It brings in money for the locals and raises awareness at the same time.
It's like those postcards coming to life.
It is, showing people that it can be done, that
Yeah.
humans and nature can coexist. And they share these success stories to inspire others to do the same.
So it's not just about Taiwan.
No. These ideas can be used anywhere in the world with mountains facing similar problems.
Reforestation, phytoremediation, ecotourism.
Exactly. Like sharing those postcards with the whole world, saying, hey, this
Right.
might work for you too.
And that's what's so exciting about this presentation.
Right.
It doesn't just lay out the problems, it gives us hope. It shows a path forward.
Where conservation and development can go hand in hand. But at the end of the day, it comes down to each of us,
What do you mean?
What can we as listeners do to help?
Right. It's easy to feel like one person can't make a difference.
But you can. Remember those postcards. Every choice we make is like creating our own postcard from the future.
I like that.
Do we want a barren landscape or a thriving ecosystem?
Okay, I see your point. Those postcards are a call to action.
They are. The future is in our hands. But what can we actually do? I can't plant a whole forest by myself. No, but there's plenty you can. You could support organizations that are working to protect these places. Even just choosing sustainable products, reducing your carbon footprint, it all helps.
So it's about making choices that align with that vision postcard.
Exactly. And don't forget about education. Talking to people, sharing what you've learned. The more people who get it, the better chance we have of making that vision a reality.
It's like we each have the power to paint that picture with our actions.
Exactly. It's not about feeling helpless. It's about taking action, no matter how small.
I love that. Okay, so going back to Taiwan, this presentation, it doesn't just focus on the problems, right?
No, not at all. It offers some real solutions, too.
Okay, so let's talk about those. What are some of the things they highlight?
Well, one thing they focus on is the importance of legislation.
Laws.
Yeah, like creating protected areas in the mountains.
Right.
Places where development is restricted.
To give the
Yeah.
plants and animals some space, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also cracking down on pollution. Making sure industries aren't dumping harmful stuff that ends up in the soil.
So stricter environmental regulations.
Right. But they also talk about community-based conservation.
What's that?
Well, it's basically involving the people who actually live in those mountain areas,
Okay.
helping them find ways to make a living that don't harm the environment.
Because, like we said before, it's not about shutting down all economic activity.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance.
So how do they do that? What are some examples?
Well, one example they give is ecotourism.
Oh, right. We talked about that a bit before.
Yeah, but they go into more detail here, like setting up hiking trails and guided tours that are designed to minimize the impact on the environment.
So people can still experience the beauty of those mountains?
Yes, but in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah.
And it also provides jobs for the local communities.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they also talk about sustainable agriculture, like helping farmers in the mountains to adopt practices that protect the soil and water.
So they can still grow food, but in a way that's eco-friendly.
Right. And another thing they emphasize is the importance of research.
To understand those ecosystems even better.
Exactly. Because the more we know about how these plants and animals interact with their environment, the better equipped we are to protect them.
So it's all connected, right? The laws, the community involvement, the scientific research.
It's all part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And they even talk about the role of education.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. People need to understand the importance of these ecosystems.
Exactly. They have to care, you know. And that's where things like visitor centers and educational programs come in.
So it's about spreading awareness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because ultimately protecting these mountains is a collective effort.
It takes everyone working together.
Exactly. From the scientists and policymakers to the local communities and even tourists.
We all have a role to play.
And remember those postcards we were talking about?
Yeah.
Well, the presentation kind of ends with this challenge to the audience.
What do you mean?
They ask, what kind of postcard do you want to send from the future?
Oh, I like that. It makes you think.
It does. What kind of world do we want to leave behind for future generations?
A world where those mountains are still thriving, hopefully?
Exactly. And it's up to us to make that happen. Through our choices, our actions, our voices. We all have the power to shape the future.
So what does your postcard from the future look like? I'm curious. What do you see?
That's a great question. Well, I think mine would show a world where we've managed to find that balance between human needs and the needs of the natural world.
A world where those mountains are still teeming with life.
Exactly. A world where those challenge postcard scenes are just a distant memory.
Yeah.
And where the vision postcard has become a reality.
That's a beautiful vision.
It is. And I truly believe it's achievable. But it's going to take all of us working together to make it happen.
I agree. So what can our listeners do? What are some concrete actions they can take?
Well, for starters, I think it's important to stay informed. Learn about the challenges facing these ecosystems, but also about the solutions that are being developed.
Okay, so educate yourself.
Right. And then share what you learn with others. Talk to your friends, your family, your community. Spread the word. Because the more people who understand the importance of these issues, the more likely we are to see real change.